Which day two offensive lineman would make the most sense for the Dallas Cowboys? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to take a look at a couple day two offensive linemen that could be of interest to the Dallas Cowboys. By now, you guys know all the names in round one: Graham Barton, Jackson Powers-Johnson, Tyler Guyton. But let's shift our focus to some day two guys. And we're going to be doing this kind of all week long, looking more at the round two, round three prospects. I want to start with Zach Frazier, who is pretty highly thought of in this class. Maybe not offensive, or maybe not center one or center two, but he is a player that a lot of people like. What did you see when you put on the tape?
Well, I mean, first things first, I think a lot of people like him because of the kind of lasting impression that he made with his last little bit of playing time with West Virginia on the field. Just to kind of backload the front end first, this is the guy who broke his femur during their game against, I think it was, now I can't remember. I think it was North Carolina State. I can't remember, but
yeah,
it was the last game of the season. He breaks his femur, right? Stays on the field for a couple snaps so that his team doesn't lose any extra time or a timeout, so that they can kick it was Baylor. I remember now. So that they can score the game-winning points. And then was basically during another timeout that they had sanctioned, was able to be carried off the field with the help of a wide receiver. That's the kind of toughness that you want in an offensive lineman who's gutting it out in the end in order to make sure that his team has enough to score. So this guy, short, stocky build, short arms, but he has enormous hands. Like, he has like something in the 99th percentile for hands for center. It's almost 11-inch hands. Wide body with thick legs. Actually, kind of average size overall for a center. Like, when you kind of even everything out a little bit. He is an elite high school heavyweight wrestler. He's a 4-time West Virginia state champion, and you see it all over his tape. I mean, he has all the stereotypical aspects associated with wrestlers that are playing football, right? He's got a strong grip. He's got great core strength. He understands leverage very well, and he uses it with the low center of gravity that he's developed through all the years of wrestling, right? The other part of that is his physicality is clearly very natural. He finishes. He's a hand fighter throughout the snap. You can constantly see him just readjusting and like seemingly punching his guy as he's kind of escorting him out of the hole. His techniques can be a little inconsistent at times. Like, the more he more than makes up for it by being so natural, operating on the move and understanding his assignment. But there are times when his hand punches could be a little more accurate. It feels like he has to adjust his hands a lot, which shouldn't always be necessary. Stronger moving forward than he is moving backwards. Doesn't always have the sand to anchor versus bull rushes, but at the same time, you don't see those same players that are bull rushing him toss him aside easily, in the run game, or he's very sticky as a run blocker. He looks and moves like a brawler looking for a fight, not exceptionally agile on the move. He looks like he's stumbling out to come mess somebody up after a night of drinking at the bar. He gets to the second level very cleanly because of his athleticism, but he can struggle to kind of break down and hit a target. I think he has some limits to his agility, where he in the way he kind of breaks down and kind of be able to zero in on a target. Great feet when getting around bodies and engaging with targets in the run game. When he's uncovered, he is a battering ram on double teams. He throws his hip violently into his targets. Great on short yardage, QB sneaks. Hands are strong, but not always on target. strong with his backside hand on zone runs, moves his opponent horizontally and doesn't allow him to peel back inside. You see lots of snaps where he's getting horizontal. He's got his guy hooked and the play comes up behind him on the backside. The defensive lineman tries to cut back inside. He can't. He doesn't let him. He just keeps on driving him towards the sideline. Plays fast when he knows his assignment, but middling athleticism shows up when he has to operate outside the confines of the play. Probably limited to a center only. We talked about the broken leg. He can stalemate the momentum of a bigger defender than generate push going his direction. Leverage is this guy's superpower. Where does he win? Powerful gripped, very well leveraged center. Unanswered questions. Can he improve his punch accuracy? If he can improve his punch accuracy, this guy can go to another level because his hands are so good that when he gets his hands on you, he grips you and it's over. The issue with him at times is getting a good punch in order for him to get a grip on you. If he can improve that and get a little bit better accuracy, I think he still has some room to grow.
My only concern, Landon, is that, man, the advanced stats just do not love him very much. If you're watching with us on YouTube right now, these are the stable numbers according to Pro Football Focus. Pass block grade in the 32nd percentile, pass block grade with no play action, 27th percentile. He's below the 50th percentile in run block grade on both gap and zone runs. Now, again, I understand PFF is not the Bible when it comes to grading offensive linemen, but it is a little concerning that, like, you look at his grades, they're not overly impressive, and maybe that's a scheme, but I think everything else indicates that he's probably going to be a good player in the NFL. It's just, I wonder, is he like a one and done contract kind of center, or is he somebody that you want to keep on your team for 8 to 9 to 10 years? Because I worry that he's going to be like in the Tyler Biadasz level of center, like a good but not great center that you just don't really want to pay. And is that really worth drafting in the second round?
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate point. I think that a lot of, well, first off, I'll say, while watching the tape, it was embarrassing what he had around him at West Virginia on the offensive line, especially. Like it just felt like at the snap, especially when you're watching like Penn State, like they were just destroying that offensive line at the snap, and he was the only person holding up. So I tend to think that he's a little bit better athlete than Biadasz is, a little bit tougher.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
And I think that difference is the difference between, him going in the 4th round where Biadasz went versus him going, in the late 2nd, early 3rd, which is probably where he'll end up going.
Although what's crazy to me is, again, I monitor all of these consensus mock drafts and big boards. He's kind of slowly crept up all offseason to the point now that he's 31st overall on the big board. And I'm not saying that's too high for him, but it might be too high for him.
Yeah, I mean, look, I tend to think that his issues are that he's not an incredible athlete, like especially testing wise, right? His athleticism is more subtle in the fact that he's a wrestler, and it's like in kind of the margins, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the thing is that I like about him is that most of his deficiencies are technique based. So that means that they're pretty well fixable, or you hope they will be fixable. But I think that's another argument, right? This is not an inexperienced center. This is a guy who has played a lot of snaps. So is there a question of, can he actually develop some of this stuff? So I mean, it's tough because I could see this guy being a very high floor player with some ceiling, but I could also see this being a kind of very middling floor, and he's just an average center that you're taking in the 2nd round. And you're right, maybe you feel like you overpaid because he just never really went anywhere.
I do think he's pretty scheme diverse. I don't think he has to be just a zone blocking center. Do you?
No, absolutely not. I think one of his best things that he does is getting out of the snap, out of his stance, and getting around and navigating bodies, like especially as a puller and as a blocker. So yeah, I definitely think he can operate in a man or a power blocking scheme, as well as I think he's good at the inside zone because he's good on double teams. He gets to the 2nd level quick.
But pretty clearly to you, the 3rd best center in this class behind JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson, and Graham Barton.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure. Like, I mean, I I'd heard a little bit about this guy. It's obviously seen a lot. Obviously, I've seen JPJ and Barton a lot. So I was interested to see exactly where he would fit. I would say that I have a lot more kind of back and forth in my mind between who's better between Barton and JPJ and this guy. Although he's good, I like him a lot. there's some daylight between him and those other two.
I would agree. All right, let's go look at offensive tackle, because if the Cowboys do draft a Graham Barton or a Jackson Powers Johnson in round 1, they very well could be looking for an offensive tackle in round 2. Let's start with Houston left tackle Patrick Paul next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The sports calendar is absolutely loaded, and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action, because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 that you can use to bet on the college basketball tournament, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. I can't wait for LSU Iowa tonight on the women's side of the bracket. It's going to be so much fun. Go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Lana, let's talk about Patrick Paul from Houston, who is one of the most physically gifted offensive tackles in this class. What did you see from the tape?
Yeah, another just enormous freak of nature, right? You see him as the kind of Amari Mims, body type, right? He's just enormous. He's 6'7.5", 330 pounds plus. He's got an 86-inch plus wingspan, over 36-inch arms. And he's athletic for his size. He's a smooth mover. He is a hard thing to say. Smooth mover for such a big body, right? I think he has big, long legs that helps him kind of take longer strides, which helps in some of his sets. The issue I have with him is that he's a little bit stiff in his lower body. He is tall, which is, I'd love to see him sit in his stance a little bit more, though. He plays a little bit too bent over, and he's doing that, I think, to kind of access better leverage as opposed to playing high, but it translates to a lot of full-on waist bending at times, which is obviously problematic. Balance isn't always great because he plays with the high center of gravity too much. Like most taller tackles, struggles at times to redirect his movements in response to pass rushers. He has, as I put in quotations, Tulsa Tyler Smith level wind up to his punch, right? And it results in some bad hand placements outside of the frame, and eventually it's going to land him in some holding calls. He needs tighter hands, like in general, obviously what I just described, but also he's just catching opponents too much. It's in not delivering a blow. If a pass rusher can make him stop his feet, his bad hands will really show up because he ends up just spreading his arms out wide like this. I don't know if you can't see me, but like he's trying to scare a bear off or something on Griffith Park. And he ends up just kind of like grabbing guys as they get around him, which is obviously holding. Like it almost would be better just to see if the guy misses the tackle than to draw an obvious holding call at times. Since his hands are low at times, I mean, that's the issue is, again, if you think about Tulsa Tyler Smith, if you guys remember, it wasn't just that his hands were reaching around to grab guys. His hands started low, right? His hands didn't start up high where he was getting a good punch when he needed to, and he could strike when he needs it. His hands start low, so it has to be like a big looping thing. And it ends up, what it means is that not only does it take a long time for his hands to get where they're going, he's exposing his chest to pass rushers. And that combined with the fact that he's not playing with incredible leverage all the times means he's susceptible to being forklift, which is hilarious to watch. A 6'2.5", 265-pound college pass rusher forklift a 6'8", 330-pound monster. But guess what, guys? It's there on tape. It's crazy. He's strong enough in the run game, but more consistent technique provides upside here. Look, he is a absolute monster. He is athletic. He is strong. He can move. And I think these are all reasons why, and he's a planet player, right? There's just not human beings that are like 6'8", 330 plus that move like this guy. The bottom line with me on this guy, though, is that it feels like his feet and play stance have been just tinkered with. I tend to think, I'm of the belief that all offensive linemen have their own unique stances and that we should work to kind of help them, make those stances work. But to me, it feels like he has just been, oh, you're 6'8", 330 pounds. Let's tinker with your stance and footwork just enough so you can get by. When in reality, when he gets to the NFL, I think he's going to have to rebuild his stance, his footwork, all from the ground up, because ultimately where he is now is that instead of actually gaining good leverage, instead of actually sitting down in his seat, instead of actually having the lower body flexibility that unlocks the agility, that unlocks the balance, that unlocks the kind of things that you're looking for in his game, he's cheating. He's doing a series of cheats to kind of bend himself over in order to get down to where he needs to go, but that is not going to serve him against NFL pass rushers. And even if you disagree with me about that, I'll just say this: even if you feel like his technique could work, NFL offensive line coach is going to get in there and want to strip it down and start it over. So even if you feel like his footwork is okay or he can get by with his stance, I have a feeling that no matter where he goes, an NFL offensive line coach is probably going to try and strip him down and start over. So that's just something to keep in mind with, his learning curve. Where does he win? He's got smooth feet and a big body. That's why I think that the footwork rebuild can work, because he has the athleticism to do what he needs to do. It's just right now, it's like a guy who's trying to chase a good golf swing, right? He's trying to remember 4 or 5 different things that his friends have told him in order to get his golf swing going, and he's not naturally, getting into his pass stance. Unanswered questions for him. Is he going to need a technique reworking from the ground up? I like him a lot because I think he has all the athleticism and all the talent, but the problem is that he's going to get overdrafted because of reasons. And I think he's going to need to probably almost have a redshirt year. I would love to revisit Patrick Paul in year 2 in the NFL and see where he is, because I do think he can develop into a really good tackle.
So one of the things that I do when I watch offensive linemen is I'll watch him, and as I'm watching them, I'll just jot down a couple names. And these aren't to say he's going to develop into these players or he's going to become these players, but this is who Patrick Paul reminded me of at times. I wrote him down. A little bit of some Matt Waletzko there, although I think he's way more polished to what Matt Waletzko is.
Yeah.
Blake Freeland, who was the BYU tackle that went, I think, in the 3rd round last year. Spencer Brown, who is the Bills right tackle, who came out of, I think it was Northern Iowa 2 or 3 years ago.
Was it Northern Iowa? Yeah,
Northern
Iowa. I think you're right. Yeah.
And a little bit of Nate Solder. When Solder came out back, was that 2010, 2011, where you're this 6'8" with really long arms, but I can't say the word skinny because there's just nothing skinny about a 330 pound offensive lineman, but a very linear body, I guess is the way for me to say it. He's one that I really struggle with. And if you go look at the numbers from PFF, the pass blocking stuff is amazing. 94th percentile pass blocking grade, 96th percentile pass block grade on true pass sets, 94th pass block grade with no play action. And then it's the running stuff that's a problem. And it's because I wonder how much of it is because of his height. He just can't quite get down low enough to get
it's leverage.
Leverage stuff.
It's all lower body flexibility, right? And it's like he's found ways to kind of cheat the pass protection stuff. But I don't think you can cheat the run game stuff, right? No. Because you need to get underneath bodies and move them. And if he's lumbering around, he can shield off guys, but he's not moving guys out of their spot unless he's getting underneath their pads. So
I would just feel terrified if I drafted him in round 2 and you need him to start at left tackle right away.
Yeah.
I think that would be a disaster.
Round 2, I mean, there's a chance this guy goes round 1, without a doubt. You just don't see guys you just don't see guys with this kind of physicality, or this physical trap. He's not necessarily a physical player, but this sort of physical dimensions at least.
But
right?
You're not wrong, because I remember the Colton Miller draft 2018. A lot of people thought Colton Miller was a 3rd or 4th round pick. who ended up going at 15th overall because he was 6'8", 315 pounds, and he ran a sub 5, 40-yard dash. And now Colton Miller is one of the best left tackles in the league. So I'm not saying that Patrick Paul is going to do that, but we shouldn't be surprised if we're hearing him in more conversations in the late 20s and early 30s. I don't agree with that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Here's what I will say. Is it more ridiculous for teams to reach for a guy that has so far to go as a technician than opposed to drafting a perfect technician that you're hoping to get stronger in the NFL? Because
that part always scares. Those guys.
This is the part that I've really changed on. And Tyler Smith to me is the thing that really changed me. Right? Is that I tend to think nowadays it's a lot harder to get stronger in the NFL. Right? Like if you don't have the requisite strength to go in there, then it's harder to gain that after you've been drafted. So I tend to think, listen, I absolutely would not take Patrick Paul in the first round. But I also am not going to poo-poo guys for doing it when we've seen the opposite end of these kind of guys go out and bust just as hard. The guys that are, perfect technician, exactly what you want. Yeah, he's going to need to hit the weight room when he gets into the NFL. And then suddenly they get 2 or 3 years into the season. And guess what? They're not any stronger than they were in the college football. So, I see it. I see why people do it. I wouldn't do it. But I'm also not going to be shocked if someone does it. If someone takes him in the first round.
All right, let's talk about another offensive tackle that could go on day 2, and that's Blake Fischer from Notre Dame. We will get to him next. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What's the first thing that you'd do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you go for a run? Would you take a nap? How about read a book? What about show up for a friend? A lot of us spend our lives wishing that we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can go and do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Just visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. On tomorrow's show, we're going to look at some running backs that could be options for the Cowboys in round 2, in round 3. So make sure you guys tune in for that. I know a lot of you guys are really looking forward to the running back episode, especially with the running back that could be on its way in Dallas. We're going to ignore that news. Let's talk about Blake Fischer from Notre Dame, a really interesting day 2 offensive line prospect. What did you see on tape?
Yeah, he is really interesting. Kind of really a very typical kind of day 2 tackle, right? He has a couple of warts, but overall very solid player, right? Really kind of just chalk measurements. He's 6'5", he's just under 6'6". He's 310 pounds, so he's a little bit kind of smaller, especially compared to some of these other tackle prospects we've seen, right? But he's got good wingspan, he's got good arm length, decent hand size. Has athleticism test, checks some boxes. He's got the kind of requisite athleticism. He's leggy. So he does have a little bit of a high cut torso. He's got good length and decent hand size. He definitely has some room to grow. Definitely specifically in the lower body, I would feel. He creates a really wide base stance coming out of the snap, which I really like. It's not easy to operate, and it makes it easy for him kind of moving around. He has really strong hands. When he lands blows on his opponents, they move, and he does so kind of even with imperfect body position and perfect technique. Strong hands, like I said, when he lands punches, they move. He gets his grips underneath the shoulder pad and can torque his opponent out of the gap. He's got impressive power in that way that he can actually physically move people out of the gap. He gets off the line very well. No issues gaining depth after the snap in pass pro. He's got decent explosion going vertically, forward and backwards, which is obviously a big thing. It's not an issue with him gaining depth. I mean, he gets off the ball and explodes well when he reacts. The issue he has is reacting, right? There are times when it feels like he is not timing the snap correctly. Either he doesn't know what the snap is, or he just doesn't see it well. I wonder if he has had. I wonder if he doesn't have like maybe a vision issue with his right eye. I'm interested to see. It's just fascinating because there are just so many. It's not an explosion issue because there are times when you see him do it right and he doesn't. He's as fast as Alt is faster than Alt at times. So I tend to think it might be either a concentration or maybe it's literally a vision issue. His reactive athleticism is an area of improvement for him. I think his feet and hands kind of fall out of sync once he moves unexpectedly. I also saw this a little bit with Frazier at times, right, where the kind of confidence of knowing your assignment, when that falls away, your athleticism kind of falls away a little bit too. Like you're not a good improvisational athlete, or at least compared to the rest of these guys on the field, right? Will occasionally play too high, which will lead to an ungrounded base and off-target punches. There are times when he's almost looks like he's got both feet off of the ground when he's sliding. Yep. And that, obviously it means that you're not punching very strongly, but it also means that you're not punching accurately, right? Because you don't have a good solid base to kind of lean and throw your hips into if you're kind of off the ground and you see. And I talked about this with somebody else too. I can't remember who it was that we talked about like last week that had a similar kind of. I think it might have been Morgan, where there are just times when you see him playing on one foot, and it's like that's not how they teach it. And that's because he's getting caught between his shuffles and it's putting him in a bad body position. So I think his feet need work in pass pro specifically. It looks like he's doing what works for him now, but you cannot cross your feet or have them off the ground versus NFL edges. He's ready-made in the run game, though. One of the better run blockers I've seen.
He's powerful
so far this season.
Yeah,
he is, and he knows how to hit a target and move them. Get into them. Like actually, like even when they're engaged, it's not even just a punch move. It's like driving and then twisting and turning big bodies out of the hole. And again, kind of back to what we talked about just previously about, strength coming into the NFL. A big bonus in my mind for having NFL ready strength at only 21 years old. He's a redshirt sophomore coming into the NFL at this height. Again, he's undersized, so there is more power you could add to this frame. He's under 6'6", he's 310-ish pounds. He could easily, I think, get to 320, 325 and have some more power to him. He is a little bit kind of plodding with his feet at times after he gets out of the initial stance, right? Like, and that's
why I was thinking like maybe he would be better off like on a team that has really wide stances or splits, so that way he doesn't have to make up so much depth on his kick slide.
Yeah,
I think Kansas City is a good example. Like they used Orlando Brown at left tackle, and their splits were so wide that it actually negated some of his lack of quickness.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that you could see here. Where does he win? He's a powerful run blocking tackle with upside potential as a pass protector. Unanswered questions. It feels like he could be a few screw tightens away from being a very solid NFL starter. The question is, how quickly can that happen? How quickly does he get those kind of adjustments made and get ready to be able to kind of defend and win a starting position in the NFL?
And I'll just say really quickly, for me, the biggest question, like for Dallas specifically, is he was basically a right tackle only at Notre Dame because they had Joe Alt at left tackle. So can he play left tackle in the NFL? And if the answer is yes, how long is the transition going to take him to switch everything over? Because we know he can be a good right tackle. I wonder if he's somebody that you drafted in like the second or third round with the intention of making him a swing tackle to kind of give him some time to be able to play both spots.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think he is a guy. I mean, he has played left tackle before. He played it in high school, so it's not like it's completely foreign to him. But you're right. After playing, right tackle for 2 years on the field, 3 years total, right? Like I think it is a transition, and we, especially in this podcast, never make light of that moving back and forth from left to right. We know that it's very difficult. So we don't make assumptions that a 21-year-old kid coming into the NFL is going to be able to do that and be able to start right away. And I don't think that that's a safe assumption. So, I think, like your plan for this guy is, hey, let's plan for success. Let's draft him. Let's pencil him in as the starter at left tackle. If he doesn't make it, we have contingency plans. We can make him the swing tackle until we're ready to kind of put him out there. But I tend to think he's going to be I don't think this is going to be a bust.
No, I think he's going to be an average NFL player. I just don't know where yet.
Yeah, and I think he has upside to be more than that. But I think, I feel confident that he will arrive as a borderline starter. And then by year 2, I think he's a solid starter. And then what happens from there is all based on, how his development goes.
Really quickly, before we go, can you stack these 3 offensive linemen? Because for me, it's probably Patrick Paul, Zach Frazier, Fisher.
I probably would flip Frazier and Paul. But
you'd rather have Frazier over Paul?
I think so, just because
I think he's going to be. I've got no doubt that Frazier is going to be at least an average NFL center.
That's exactly right. That's my floor for Frazier. And so and with Paul, there is some boom or bust, just because I think I think even as he plays right now, he could play, but I think that it could really get away from him if he starts losing confidence, and he doesn't have solid enough technique to fall back on when things go wrong. And I feel like things are going to go wrong in the NFL because he's not a finished player. So how does he react to that? I think Frazier will react to that better.
Little Jeremy Parnell-ish to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, right? Like Parnell's a guy who it took him a little while, right, to kind of get the confident, rework his footwork, but he had the requisite athleticism, and once it kind of all worked for him, he was a really good player for the Cowboys and for Jacksonville. So I think that's good. That's a fair comparison.
All right, that is it for today's show. Again, on tomorrow's show, make sure you check that one out. We're going to be talking about the running backs, Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, Jalen Wright. Should be a lot of fun. I've got some interesting opinions on these running backs, so be sure to tune in for that. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Check out the show on YouTube as well. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.